With all the media and movies and news and information we're exposed to, it's easy to understand why people become calloused and apathetic to any number of things troubling the world today. We're exposed to constant violence and sexuality and scandal and drama in both our entertainment and in our real lives that it's sometimes hard to determine what's real and what's not anymore. And when things in our everyday lives start feeling a little too real and uncomfortable for us, we can then be tempted to escape our reality by diving even further into movies, TV shows, and media and information, and that endless cycle snowballs. Having on-demand access to instant content of our choosing may bring with it some serious side effects, because we tend to only watch what we want to watch, and this can lead us into forming a sense of reality that we've shaped for ourselves. A reality that may not be a true representation of what's really going on in the world. And in an effort to escape much of the pain and injustice we see in everyday life, some of us may have escaped reality long enough that we've convinced ourselves that everything's okay with life and in this world. That is, if we give much thought to what's really going on in this world at all. And it's scary to think that we can actually trade reality for an alternate reality created by any media or entertainment outlet of our choosing. I'm guilty of this. A few years ago, one night I was mindlessly scrolling through social media, and I scrolled several times past a news article that had been shared by multiple people I was connected with. And I'll confess, though I'm ashamed to say, that even though this article headline talked about Christians being put to violent deaths because of their faith, I couldn't actually be bothered enough to stop for a moment to see what the article was really about. And this is troubling because I'm a Christian myself. And news of hearing about my Christian brothers suffering, didn't even stir my heart enough for me to stop and read the article, let alone pray for their families who had suffered the tragic loss of their loved ones. I may have scrolled past the article a dozen times or so before I finally decided to read it. But once I did, that article woke me up from my apathy greater than anything in my life before this moment. And I couldn't believe what I had read, what had happened in the world. All the grisly details involved with these Christians being put to death for no other reason than that they were Christians. And no words could express the shock I felt to my core. And after a few moments, I just found myself muttering over and over again, just under my breath. I kept saying three words: everything's not okay, everything's not okay, everything's not okay. And up until this moment, I had somehow thought deep down that everything in this world was okay. And I had convinced myself of this by only exposing myself to content I wanted to see. But now I had been violently woken up to the greater truth that in this world, everything is not okay. Looking back, I believe God exposed me to this tragic story of Christian martyrs because this has been the pivotal, life-changing moment for me where God woke me up from my apathy. And He showed me something specific that was terribly wrong in this world, something that breaks God's heart. That Christians could be put to death simply because of their faith. And what's being done to stop it? And now, of course, this isn't the only thing that is terribly wrong in this world, but this is what God used that day to get my attention. And since then, as I began to wake up further to this greater reality, I noticed that others around me seemed to be spiritually sleeping or unaware, in some cases apathetic, just like I was. So many people didn't seem to care that the world had gone terribly wrong. And rather than face the truth, so many of us would try to run from it or numb ourselves to it, maybe because we think, what could I possibly do to change it? What could one person do to make a difference? As this season of awakening went on for me, at first I didn't handle it well. I became angry and troubled on a deeply spiritual level. I was angry that terrible things happen to good people. And I was angry that it seemed so few people actually care. And this anger crept into large areas of my life and my thought process, and it upset the balance of everything in my life. And I felt broken inside, and I wept and pleaded with God to forgive me and to change my heart and fix what was broken in me. But all that trouble and distress and that sense of injustice that I was feeling only intensified, to the point where I just bubbled over and cried out to God saying, "Lord, please help me because I am so angry." And in that moment, I heard God speak to me very clearly, and he said, "I made you angry." In that moment, I knew that God made me angry in the sense that he was allowing me to feel and process and work through the anger and hurt that he feels for the same issues that woke me violently from my apathy. And it's been years since that awakening that I had. But all that anger that I experienced in that moment has never gone away. But I've learned to process and work through this anger and allow it to motivate me to try to be an instrument of positive change where God has me in this world. And I'm coming to terms with the idea that God may have placed me here on earth to be used by him to work for positive change in my sphere of influence in this world. And in my case, I believe that the anger that God allowed me to experience has been a good and healthy thing, so long as it brings about positive change first in me, then through me. So what about you? Is there anything that makes you burn up on the inside with anger? Try to think about it and identify it. Is there something happening in this world that no matter how hard you try, your anger towards it can't be calmed? You know that if only progress or change could be made with this one issue, that the world would be a far better place for it. Just the thought of it makes your blood boil. Is it human trafficking? Child abuse? Racism? Mental health awareness? Poverty or inequality? I believe that God has placed a seed in each one of us that, given the right, healthy attention, it could produce a fruit of passion and motivation in us to be instruments of positive change in this world. And I believe that God places a passion and a desire within each of us to make a difference in this world so that we can make the world a better place for someone else. And maybe the key to discovering this passion is by looking at that wrong thing in this life that makes you so angry because you know it's not right, and you know that the world would be a far better place if only that wrong was fixed. And once you've discovered this area of anger in your life, then don't suppress it and don't escape from it, but confront your anger and consider the possibility that this anger is something that your Creator is allowing you to experience by His design, because maybe He's just as angry about this as you are, and maybe He wants you to do something about it. Some people have called this righteous anger or holy discontent. And this is the same anger that we see in Jesus, who is God in the flesh himself, where the Bible records Jesus entered the temple and began to drive out all the people buying and selling animals for sacrifice. He knocked over the tables of the money changers and the chairs of those selling doves. He said to them, "The scriptures declare, my temple will be called a house of prayer, but you have turned it into a den of thieves." In this story, we see Jesus angered to the point that he would cause a scene, overturning tables and driving people out of the temple courts. So what was it that made him so angry? Well, it's widely believed that the money changers mentioned here in this story were cheating unsuspecting people out of their money and using God's temple and religious systems to do it. And this disgusted Jesus, and he reacted with passion, but at the same time, without sin. And this is important to know because many of us probably think that anger is not usually a good thing. But there comes a time, depending on what we do with our anger, where the anger we feel is not a sin. But maybe it's something that God intends to use to call us to action. And in the story of the temple, Jesus wasn't willing to just stand by and watch these religious people cheat the innocent. So he responded in an effort to defend and restore God's standard that had been abused in the hands of the religious. In much the same way, I don't believe that God wants you to stew in your anger while you watch from the sidelines in life. And God may want to use your anger to call you to action, to defend, to restore, to raise awareness, to inspire positive change in the world. And now many people may get uncomfortable with the idea that God wants to use your anger to inspire positive change in the world. And I think that it would come as no surprise that many people already view God as this angry being in the sky who wants to exact punishment and judgment on the world. And for this reason, many well-meaning Christians have worked hard to present Jesus in the opposite light, where he's soft, meek, and mild, the shepherd who is all-loving, gracious, kind, merciful, and forgiving. And yes, God is all those things, but he is all those things to all human beings. And in this world, there are many human beings suffering, living with injustice, and who will help them? And I'm sure that many of them are crying out to God for help. Does God hear them? You probably know there's a question that serves as one of the greatest stumbling blocks to people who simply cannot open themselves to believing in God. And that question goes something like this. If there's such thing as a God, then why would he allow such suffering in this world? And this is a fantastic question, and I won't claim to have the clear and complete answer to it. But I do believe a major part of the answer lies here. The Bible, speaking of Christians or Christ followers, says, "We will speak the truth in love, growing in every way more and more like Christ, who is the head of his body, the church. He makes the whole body fit together perfectly. And as each part does its own special work, it helps the other parts grow, so that the whole body is healthy and growing and full of love." The Bible describes the church as God's body. Where Jesus is the head, the church is the body. And each individual Christian is to be growing to be more like Jesus all the time. And that's what it means to be a Christian. A follower of Christ is to follow his example. And Jesus wasn't an apathetic spectator. He was a man of action. And each individual Christian is a member of a collective body that makes up the church, which Christ is the head of. And the way I see it, it's the head that tells the body what to do, and then the body gets the job done. And like the verse we just read says, as each part does its own special work, it helps the other parts grow so that the whole body is healthy and growing and full of love. God wants his body to grow. He wants the church to grow, his kingdom here on earth to grow. And if each person in the church was doing their part, we couldn't stop it from growing. It's God's will for his church. So if so many people in this world are asking the question, if there's a God, then where is he in all of this suffering? Then maybe his perceived absence in this world has more to do with his body not doing its job rather than him not being here. Just a thought. I fully believe that if you're a human being who's drawing air into your lungs, then God has a plan and a purpose for your life. You may not even know God in this moment. And maybe you're open to the idea of God, but if he's out there, maybe you're angry at him for all the pain, injustices, hurts that you've seen or experienced personally. And maybe you are a Christian, but you've been wrestling for a long time with this deeply rooted anger that you just can't seem to escape. But whatever your circumstance, I would offer you this thought. Don't ignore or try to run from this anger. Confront it, because maybe some of the deepest answers to your questions in life are buried inside your anger. So I challenge you, if you believe in God, or even if you don't, you've got nothing to lose. Bring your anger to God and ask him, what am I supposed to do with all this? Are you trying to tell me something in my anger? And if you ask these questions, be open to whatever answers may come, because you may discover that God has always been there in your life, especially when you didn't feel it, and that he never intended you or anyone else to hurt the way you do. You may discover that God will transform your anger into relentless passion. And you may discover that God has a plan and a purpose for you to bring relief and freedom and deliverance from pain and injustice in the lives of others. And you may discover that you're here to make a serious impact on this world, and that because you were born, the world will become a better place. I personally believe that God wants you to discover this to be true in your life. You are here to make a positive and eternal difference in the world around you. There are people right now counting on you to step into your God-given destiny. The world is not right today, and everything is not okay, but it doesn't have to stay this way. It's up to you. So what are you waiting for?